December 1st, 1842, a 19-year-old officer stands on the deck of a U.S. Navy ship, a rope already around his neck. He hasn't been court-martialed. There's been no trial. No judge, no jury, just his own captain, alone in the middle of the Atlantic, who has decided he's guilty. The man giving the order is sailing in the shadow of his own famous family name. And the boy about to die, his father is the United States Secretary of War. Within minutes, this story will help inspire one of the most famous novels in American literature, and it will permanently change how the U.S. Navy trains its officers. So how did a teenager end up on the end of a rope before anyone even reached a courtroom? To understand how this happened, you have to understand the ship. The USS Somers wasn't built for war. It was built as a classroom, a brand new experiment to train teenage boys into naval officers by throwing them straight into life at sea. Of the 120 people on board, half were teenagers. Some were as young as 14. They'd been pulled from orphanages, from the streets, from families with nowhere else to send them. And in command of all of them was a captain who believed discipline was the only thing standing between order and chaos. Captain Alexander Slidell Mackenzie wasn't just a naval officer. Back home, he was something of a celebrity, a published author, respected in New York social circles. But aboard his own ship, he ran a tight, often brutal regime. Flogging was common, so were long, stern speeches about honor and self-control. Then there was Philip Spencer, 19 years old. Smart, maybe brilliant, but restless, reckless, and obsessed with stories of piracy. He'd already been thrown off 2 previous ships for drunkenness and insubordination. Normally, a record like that ends a naval career, but Philip wasn't an ordinary midshipman. His father, John Canfield Spencer, was the United States Secretary of War, one of the most powerful men in President Tyler's cabinet. Every time Philip should have faced a court-martial, his father's name made the problem disappear. So when Philip Spencer stepped aboard the Somers in the summer of 1842, he wasn't just another problem midshipman. He was a problem nobody on that ship was allowed to solve the normal way. On November 25th, a rumor reached Lieutenant Gort Gansevoort, Mackenzie's second-in-command. One of the crew claimed Philip Spencer had been talking about mutiny, about murder, about turning the Somers into a pirate ship. Gansevoort brought the rumor straight to Mackenzie. And here's where the story gets genuinely uncertain, because to this day, historians still argue about what Spencer actually meant. A real plan? A dark joke that went too far? A list of names written half in jest? Mackenzie didn't wait to find out. He had Spencer arrested immediately, clapped in irons on his own deck. Then, one by one, more crew members were named, accused, and chained beside him. There was no trial, no formal hearing. The nearest port was days away, and Mackenzie believed, or convinced himself, that he couldn't risk waiting that long. So he decided he would be the only authority this case would ever see. For 5 days, the accused men sat shackled on the deck, watching the crew watch them. Tension on the Somers became almost unbearable. Officers held hushed, urgent conversations. Some crew members later said they feared a real mutiny might break out, not from the accused, but from the fear itself. On November 30th, Mackenzie called his officers together for one final conversation. He asked them a single question: if these men were guilty, could the ship survive long enough to bring them to a real court back home? The officers said no. And with that answer, Mackenzie made the decision that would define the rest of his life and end the lives of 3 men before the sun set the following day. On the morning of December 1st, 1842, Captain Mackenzie made his decision. There would be no trial, no judge, no appeal, just his word and the word of the officers he'd chosen to agree with him. Philip Spencer was brought up on deck, along with 2 other men accused alongside him, boatswain's mate Samuel Cromwell and seaman Elisha Small. None of them would see a courtroom. None of them would get the chance to mount a real defense. The entire crew was ordered to assemble and watch. Mackenzie wanted no confusion about who held authority on this ship, and no witnesses who could later claim they hadn't seen it happen. At Mackenzie's signal, 3 ropes were thrown over the yardarm. There was no formal reading of charges, no final statement allowed beyond a few words. Then, with the entire crew watching in silence, the order was given. By the time the sun set that day, 3 men were dead, and Captain Mackenzie had just turned an unproven accusation into something that could never be undone. He sailed the summers back to New York a hero. That wouldn't last.